Climate commitment. President Joe Biden reveals his new plans to protect the planet. Not so fast. Senator Joe Manchin hits the brakes on the Democrats' infrastructure plan. Election day. How the race for governor in Virginia could shape both political parties. And Afghanistan attack. A new round of violence follows the withdrawal of U.S. troops. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this All Souls Day. I'm Tracy Sable. President Joe Biden returns to the U.S. tonight, but before leaving a United Nations climate summit in Scotland, he promised a crackdown on methane emissions. However, not everyone is on board with the stricter regulations. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, President Joe Biden heads back to the United States. Now, on his last day in Scotland at the COP26, President Biden targeted methane emissions and the oil and gas industry watching very closely.
President Joe Biden announces tighter methane regulations.
As already been stated, it's one of the most potent greenhouse gases there is.
Methane is the main component of natural gas. The new proposal would target methane emissions from existing oil and gas wells across the U.S. The American Petroleum Institute, which opposes fees on methane, did say in a statement, "We support the direct regulation of methane from new and existing sources and are committed to building on the progress we have achieved in reducing methane emissions." President Biden also announced a new initiative to protect forests.
The United States will help the world deliver on our shared goal of halting natural forest loss.
The president says the U.S. will join a global plan to restore nearly 500 million acres of forest in the next 9 years.
And at a news conference in Scotland, the president was asked about rising gas prices, and he blamed Russia and the OPEC nations for refusing to pump more oil. And he also ripped Russia and China for being no-shows at the climate summit. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Congressional Democrats continue writing the text for the $1.75 trillion reconciliation bill, which contains much of President Biden's economic agenda. As progressives and moderates argue over its scope and price tag, Senator Joe Manchin is making news once again as he demands more accountability. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
Catholic Senator Joe Manchin is putting another wrench into the Democrat agenda, trying to get a vote on the reconciliation bill done this week. He wants lawmakers to slow down and look at the financial impact the $1.75 trillion spending bill has on the U.S. economy.
I will not support a bill that is this consequential without thoroughly understanding the impact that it'll have on our national debt, our economy, and most importantly, all of our American people.
One option, have the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office score the bill for final costs and impact, which could take weeks. Congresswoman Cori Bush criticized the West Virginia senator. Quote, Joe Manchin's opposition to the Build Back Better Act is anti-black, anti-child, anti-woman, and anti-immigrant. Democrats are moving forward and claim it's paid for.
When you look at the framework, the revenues that we're getting in will exceed the current amount that's being projected to spend. So I don't think the CBO score is going to be much of a problem.
There's some technical issues that folks are working through with respect to some of the climate provisions and some of the health care provisions, but I believe at the end of the day, we're going to find common ground.
As for the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill that deals with roads and bridges, progressives say they want guarantees on what's in the larger social spending bill first. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the true infrastructure bill would add $256 billion to the deficit. Senator Manchin wants action on it now instead of tying the two bills together.
We're holding that bill hostage is not going to work to get my support of what you want. It's what we should all agree on and work through the process. I'm open to supporting a final bill that helps move our country forward, but I'm equally open to voting against a bill that hurts our country.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is not ready to give up on a vote in the next few days on both bills, but the clock is ticking as the House is in recess next week. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, it is election day across the country, including in Virginia, where the contentious race for governor between Democrat Terry McAuliffe and Republican Glenn Youngkin will be decided. The two candidates differ on major issues facing the state, such as abortion and education. Joining us now is Vince Coglianese, Editorial Director of the Daily Caller. Vince, welcome back. Always great to see you. Well, it is election day across the country, as we know, but the race that's getting the most attention, of course, is the Virginia gubernatorial race. Vince, let's talk about that and what's at stake.
It's a huge deal. And the reason that the Virginia race in particular, this is where I'm broadcasting from today, gets so much attention is because the Republican has a genuine chance of winning here. Terry McAuliffe is the Democrat, former governor of Virginia. He's hoping for a second chance at the job. Glenn Youngkin, a newcomer to politics, the Republican, is polling very well right now. All of the latest surveys have shown that this race is indeed neck and neck. There was one Fox News poll that showed that Glenn Youngkin was ahead by 8 points. This is a situation that Democrats and most people did not expect to ever be taking place. Terry McAuliffe, not really a good political candidate, didn't really matter. The expectation was that Virginia was going to stay as blue as ever. A Republican has not won a statewide race in the Commonwealth of Virginia since 2009. But today, Glenn Youngkin has a very real chance of being the first Republican to do that in well over a decade. And it's got Democrats very nervous, not only about Virginia, but also about the direction of their agenda after Election Day. Should Terry McAuliffe lose, Democrats in Washington are believed to take that as a sign that their policies and the direction that they're taking the country in are being voted down, even in blue areas like Virginia.
Vince, I want to back it up there. You know, you said this race is really, really close, kind of neck and neck. We know that President Biden won Virginia in the 2020 presidential election. What happened to kind of turn the tide and make this race so close?
The big issue and where Youngkin has succeeded is education. That is just the biggest thing that's dominating all the conversations. There have been a couple surveys done lately that demonstrate that among Virginia voters, the issue that they think is number one is their concern about the education of the children in Virginia. Now, the guy who's got the edge on that's Glenn Youngkin. Glenn Youngkin has, I believe, somewhere around a 7 or 9 point edge on the issue of education. And it's really not a surprise. I mean, a lot of these school boards where you've seen the most controversy, these counties where you've seen the most controversy, they're controlled by Democrats. And people of all political stripes, certainly Republicans, absolutely independents, you're seeing that in the surveys, and even a few Democrats are very unhappy with the way that the schools were closed over the duration of the pandemic. As they get open, they're dissatisfied with the nature of those openings and the way that they continue to be locked down. And they're also dissatisfied with the quality of education that their children are or maybe aren't even receiving. So as a result, you're seeing a huge pushback led by parents. And the reality here is, Tracy, that Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat, just a couple of weeks ago in a debate made a world-class gaffe on stage when he said that he doesn't think parents should be in the business of telling schools what they should teach. He said those words. That is about as bad as it gets when it comes to politics. You don't insult parents. That's what he did, and now he could be paying the consequences on Election Day.
Absolutely. As a parent of two teenagers, I know that well. When you get parents involved, watch out. Not a whole lot of time left, Vince, but I want to talk about the other important elections tonight. Folks in New Jersey head to the polls to vote for their governor, and New York is also holding a mayoral race. Let's talk about that. What's going on there?
Well, in New York, it seems like Eric Adams, the Democrat there, is likely to prevail over Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, just because of the party nature of this race. Eric Adams, a former police officer, is in a good position to win. He is not seen as crazy as other Democrats, to include the current mayor, Bill de Blasio, is. He's even kind of, not fully jumped in on the vaccine mandates that are driving so many New York City frontline health workers and first responders to leave their jobs this week. So Eric Adams, my guess, will prevail here in New York. Again, very strong Democrat stronghold. And then meanwhile, in New Jersey, the Republican there is definitely making this a race. I think there was one survey this morning that showed that he's trailing Phil Murphy by just 1 point. But Phil Murphy, even so, likely expected to win this thing. The knock on Phil Murphy, there are many, but one of the big ones is that among nursing home deaths during coronavirus, his state led the country. And that's a product of him having very similar policies to those controversial nursing home policies in New York that led to so many people dying of COVID within the nursing homes.
All right, Vince, thank you so much for your time. We'll see how everything shakes out tonight. Vince Coglianese, Editorial Director of the Daily Caller. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy.
In Afghanistan, an attack against a Kabul military hospital has killed more than 20 people, injuring dozens of others. There were at least 2 explosions with accompanying gunfire. 4 suspects were killed and another was captured. ISIS has carried out similar attacks recently as it challenges Taliban control. At least 3 people have died after an under-construction apartment building collapsed in Lagos, Nigeria. Some 100 workers were on site at the 21-story structure. 3 have been rescued. The cause is not known. Coming up, an update on the Supreme Court. The justices remain silent on a Catholic hospital case. The Supreme Court denied hearing an appeal from a Catholic hospital in California. The hospital was sued after refusing to perform a hysterectomy on a woman who identifies as transgender. The court did not comment on why it will not hear the case. The hospital says that it does not discriminate against transgender individuals, but does refuse certain treatments that go against the Catholic faith. And joining me now is Ryan Anderson, president at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Ryan, welcome back. Always great to see you. Let's talk a little bit more about this case. I know that you have said that it has nothing to do with transgender rights, but disagreements about nature and purpose of medicine. Talk to us more about that.
Sure. I mean, so the activists here say that this is a transgender man. But if this is really a man, there's no uterus that would need to be removed in a hysterectomy procedure. Now, if this is really a woman with a healthy uterus, then the Catholic hospital is making a correct medical judgment that we don't remove the healthy body parts from the healthy bodies of individuals. As you described, this is a woman who wants to identify as a man. The Catholic Church correctly teaches that this is not good medicine. You don't need to be Catholic to know this, but being Catholic helps to know this. And so part of the ERDs for Catholic hospitals is that we don't perform procedures to sterilize people. We also don't perform procedures to try to do what's impossible, which is to do sex change procedures. Those aren't possible. So this is bad medicine, and that's why Catholic hospitals don't engage in it.
And Ryan, as I mentioned, the court didn't say why they wouldn't hear the case. Is that typical? And since the appeal was denied and the lower court ruling stands, what does that mean for the hospital?
Sure. So, I mean, the interesting thing about this, there's some disagreement amongst court watchers, is that the lower courts hadn't actually finalized the case yet. The trial court said, the trial need not proceed because religious liberty protections protect the church and the hospital, the church hospital, from being litigated in this way. It was then a state appeals court that said, no, the trial can proceed. And then the hospital appealed this to the U.S. Supreme Court, saying that federal protections for the free exercise of religion would prevent the state claim from taking place. What's happened here is that it's going to go back down to the state courts. Both the patient and the hospital are going to have their day in court. The state courts are going to have to adjudicate this, including what the federal claim, the federal protections for free exercise of religion means in this case. If the conclusion of that goes poorly, the hospital might then end up back at the Supreme Court. But this isn't a permanent loss for the hospital. It's a temporary setback, but they're still going to have their day in court.
Obviously, things are still in flux here, but what type of impact do you think it could ultimately have on Catholic hospitals overall in California and possibly in other states?
I mean, I think the overall impact here should be one in which more and more Catholics and more or less all citizens of goodwill speak out for the freedom to practice good medicine. That's what's at stake here. Will Catholic doctors, Catholic hospitals be able to treat patients in accordance both with the faith and in accordance with true science and good medicine? No one should be pressured by the government into doing what violates their reasonably formed conscience. And likewise, no one should be forced into practicing bad medicine. And hospitals, particularly Catholic hospitals, should not be forced by the state into violating their beliefs, both when it comes to the faith and when it comes to the nature and purpose of medicine.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much. Always great to get your analysis. We appreciate it. Ryan Anderson, president at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Up next, another Supreme Court case you should know about, how it could affect the pro-life movement. And see how Pope Francis is recognizing All Souls Day. The Supreme Court has ordered a New York State court to reconsider its decision on a case regarding mandatory coverage for abortions in New York State insurance. The law allows for very few religious exemptions, which prompted the suit from a variety of religious orders and organizations, including an Anglican order called the Sisterhood of St. Mary. And joining us now is Eric Baxter, Vice President and Senior Counsel at Becket. Eric, great to see you. So good to be with you. For those who are not familiar, tell us a little bit more about this case and why it's so important, not just for the Sisterhood of St. Mary, but also for other religious groups.
Well, your viewers have probably heard of the contraception mandate that's been in the court for almost a decade. The state of New York tried to one-up the federal government on that and impose an abortion mandate requiring all employers to cover surgical abortions in their health care plans. And so our clients, religious churches, Catholic, Anglican, Baptist, Lutheran, a wide group of religious organizations, of course, have religious objections to participating in abortion. And so we are participating in the suit against the state of New York, asking for an exemption for their religious beliefs.
And Eric, why were they denied originally a religious exemption? What disqualified them under New York state law?
Yeah, the exemption that was put into the law is ridiculously narrow. Jesus himself would not qualify for it. It basically protects churches that are very inward looking, but if you walk outside the walls of your house of worship, you're not protected. If you serve people outside of your church community, you're not protected. That's a completely unfair and ridiculously narrow exemption. And so our clients, they want to serve people of all faiths in their community. They want to employ the best people to perform those services, whether they belong to their faith or not. And so because of that, they were denied an objection. And we've argued that that's a violation of their religious beliefs and their rights under the Free Exercise Clause.
And what happens to the groups that are petitioning against the mandate in New York? What happens to them if they don't comply? What type of penalties could they face?
Well, they're forced to drop their insurance for all of their employees. And part of their religious belief is also to take care of their employees and make sure that they are well provided for, that they have the health insurance that they need for their families. And all of those employees would lose their health insurance if the churches refuse to participate in abortion. And that's, I think, one reason why the Supreme Court remanded this case and told the New York courts they have to reconsider this decision.
And what comes next in the case? What can we expect?
Well, we will expect the New York Intermediate Court of Appeals to hear this decision again. The Supreme Court, I think, will be watching this very closely. 3 of the justices, Justice Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch, indicated that they would have taken the case themselves and decided it. They needed a 4th justice to be able to do that, but they sent a clear signal that they will be watching the state courts, and so the state courts will have a chance to reconsider the case. And then I think there's an opportunity, if they get it wrong again, we'll be back at the Supreme Court.
And Eric, before I let you go quickly, what other cases are you following? What do you have your eye on right now?
Yeah, there are a number of other interesting cases on this similar issue, cases hospitals required to perform transition surgeries against their religious beliefs. And we think the court will be watching this issue generally, whether religious organizations are allowed to serve the public without giving up their religious beliefs. But we're very confident in the end that the court will rule in favor of the religious organizations. In fact, in remanding this case, the abortion mandate case to New York, the Supreme Court relied on its earlier ruling in Fulton versus Philadelphia, one of Becket's cases where we defended religious adoption providers. And the court there made clear that you don't give up your religious beliefs just because you go into the public square to serve the public. And so we believe that in the end, the court will respect the rights of religious organizations to serve in accordance with their faith. and without having to participate in activity that violates their deepest held religious beliefs.
Eric, thank you so much for your time and for your analysis today. Eric Baxter, Vice President and Senior Counsel at Becket. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And finally tonight, Pope Francis celebrates Mass for All Souls Day at a military cemetery in Rome. Mass took place at a burial ground for French soldiers who died in the Second World War. In his homily, Pope Francis reminded the faithful the graves of the fallen are crying out for peace around the world. Joining us now from Rome is Solene Tadie, Europe correspondent for the National Catholic Register. Solene, great to see you. We're going to get to the Mass and why there was a little bit of controversy surrounding it in just a minute. But first, can you tell us about this cemetery and its history?
Well, the French military cemetery is located on Monte Mario, one of the 7 hills of Rome. There are right now some 1,800 graves. Most of them are the resting places of mostly Moroccan and Algerian soldiers who served in the French army during the Italian liberation campaign in 1943 and 44. That's why a great number of the headstones actually bear a Muslim croissants. Some graves were without a name, but all of them bear the inscription Mort pour la France, meaning died for France. The cemetery was built by the Italian government to pay tribute to the French troops who actually helped liberate the country from the Nazis from 1943 and fought against fascist troops as well.
And Solene, what else did the Holy Father emphasize in his homily?
The Holy Father walked along rows of graves in the French military cemetery, stopping every so often to pray, to give his blessing, and to place white flowers on some of the graves as well. He said that the tombs should be a message of peace, which urged people to stop building and selling the weapons of war. So he invited the faithful to look at the graves of the fallen, saying, "Stop, brothers and sisters, stop weapons manufacturers." So the message was pretty clear. The Pope also added that soldiers who went in goodwill, called by the fatherland to defend their land, and who have died there, are with the Lord now.
And I understand the Pope's decision to celebrate the Mass in the cemetery, that it created some controversial reactions. What more can you tell us about that?
Yes, indeed. The choice of the place for the celebration of the Mass this year has aroused criticism from associations of victims of the so-called Marocchinate, which refers to the mass rape and killings perpetrated against the Italian civilian population during World War II by the colonial troops of the French Expeditionary Force in this famous period of 1943 and 44. It is not a very well-known episode of the history of World War II, but these events have left a deep mark on the local collective memory. So the president of the National Association of Victims of this Marocchinate, Emiliano Ciotti, even sent a letter to the Holy Father before Mass, claiming that between 20,000 and 60,000 civilians, mostly women and children, were the victims of atrocities. Many of them were raped and murdered by the French troops of liberation. So in his letter, Ciotti asked Pope Francis to find the right words in his homily to pay tribute, to remember these innocent victims as well, which he considers to be forgotten by all, although it's true that the Italian government has shown an increasing awareness since 2004, as it has begun to pay tributes to the victims. But anyways, the victims are still commemorated by this association on May 18 every year on the occasion of the National Remembrance Day for the victims of the so-called Marocchinate.
Well, Solene, thank you so much for this report today. Very important. Thank you again. Solene Tadie, Europe correspondent for the National Catholic Register. Great to speak with you.
Thank you.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.